I'll get you tomorrow, Gershie, don't worry.
You printing it out?
Yeah.
I wouldn't mind actually writing it in English because it's all quite a hard language.
That's Moisey's next project.
If you want to write it, then I copy it.
I was wondering, it depends how long it takes you to copy it.
Find mine because the battery's not so good.
No, I'm leaving it on this. Let's see if it looks like this. You printing it out?
We're trying on the base tin from here, Moish.
We're trying it on the base from here because you're not always here on time.
It's like a weird angle. It's a weird angle.
Can you just make it that change the picture?
You know it says weasels all the time. Is that usually a common animal in the river or?
This is weird.
Can you see me? Who's on, by the way, just now?
Who's on? A guy with a mobile number.
You heard that? No, I meant to the stern.
Yeah. Hello.
Hello. Are you okay with this angle?
No, you can't see.
Oh, you can't see.
Yeah, the angle's fine with me.
So it must be the same. You think it's on the river.
Yeah, I assume that's the.
Like not common animal. Yeah, it's all not.
Yeah, I don't know. I've never seen it.
You see a weasel. I don't say surely you don't get weasels. I don't work out why it seems like a common animal.
Weasels, yeah, must have a lot of weasels around.
Bother.
That's what you're
I think
saying.
there'll be squirrels, you say.
Yes.
Yeah, you're right. Probably not far from. It's probably not.
Probably British river. It's anything more like British river.
But why was it so long on the Zoom?
I met some talk today.
All right.
So I said to him, we're starting with this going to occur in Motzei Shabbos. He said to me, he's jealous. His whole life, he's never learned it.
Never learnt or never understood it.
Never learned it.
Not even tried.
Not even tried. I think it's going to occur.
The rub of the shoe.
He said, yeah.
What we learning?
We're
Motzei
starting
Shabbos,
Motzei
like,
Shabbos,
all
a
hard
sugya called Chaninas going to occur. It's quite a hard sugya. So I met somebody, so I said to him,
What daf is it?
with Dalet. So he said to me, his whole life he's never learned it. He said that's the big advantage of Daf Yomi. Because what happens is, if you don't learn Daf Yomi, you become quite an ignoramus in certain topics. You may never get it to the bottom, but at least you get the basic ideas of every sugya. It made me feel quite good, actually. No, I mean, like this, I'm not going to say that the Andrew Fish is like we'll all know the Tum of a Tower, but we'll know the basics. Recently, somebody asked me that something that never gets wet. It never becomes tummy, even if that burst touched it, it never becomes tummy. You couldn't believe it. That's it's only about like 20 places of Shas.
Already we've had it.
Yes. Okay. Well, after that, you done with base. Who was the bottom line? And the question is like this: we have a machlikas, we have Yehuda and Chachamim, as to whether should a person do b'dikas chametz in the afternoon or the Pesach. Yehuda says only do b'dikas chametz till the time when chametz is forbidden. Once chametz is forbidden, don't do b'dikas chametz. Why does Yehuda say that?
I don't want you to find it.
Doesn't want you to find it. Why? Not because he's not going to eat it. The better, don't look for chametz. Start looking for chametz on Pesach. You're not going to eat the chametz on Pesach. That'll be the worst. The chametz say no, we don't want you to have chametz in the house. Keep looking. Meaning that the machlekes of Yehuda and Chachamim, in other words, is: are we chayshash that a person, when he touches something, when he starts dealing with something which is forbidden, will he fall into the trap of doing something worse? That is the machlekes of Yehuda and Chachamim. And now what we do for quite some time is we go through many other topics in Shas and see, does it fit in with this machlekes? Now, even though in our Mishnah says Yehuda and Chachamim, and then we say Chachamim argue about Yehuda, who is it most likely to be? Rameh. Why is it most likely to be Rameh? Because he was one who always argued with Yehuda. And the man adds that also Stam Mishnah is Rameh. So our Mishnah is a Stam Mishnah, so it's most likely to be Rameh. So even though our Mishnah doesn't say a name, as you pointed out correctly, that Yehuda and Rameh were the ones who always used to argue, like Beisham and Beisilel and many other people. We have learned that by and Mother. So here you go, Yehuda and Rameh, also the Stam Mishnah is Rameh. So we're going to have to fit in, does this opinion of Yehuda and Rameh hold true in all the other places in Shas where they argue about similar kinds of things? Some of them are less similar, some are more similar. So it's a bit more like this. For me, Gozal Rabbi Yehuda, the Maaseh Mechamini. It doesn't really make it clear, it's not complete. But tonight, we've learned in the Mishnah. Mishakar Va'ima, when they bought the Korban Noma, when would have been the Korban Noma? They did Pesach, what time of day? When that's when they cut it. During the day, but early in the morning, we had it more on Shabbos, that by midday you can be sure that it's finished. And once they did that, Yotzin would go out and wait in Shukri Shlamshim, and then came after Kali. They would come out and immediately, instantly, they would find the marketplace full of the new produce which nobody until now was allowed to buy. Why? Because it was Chodosh. And you would come out and suddenly it was everywhere, right? Like sales. Now, the only way they could do that was by harvesting it before the Omer was bought. It takes time, harvesting it, shipping it, getting it into the markets. So they must have harvested it before the time of the Omer. Says the boy, Yudalef from Dalef, top of the page. Rabbi Yehuda Meir said that the Chachamim would disapprove. Why would they disapprove? What would this be to disapprove? What's wrong with harvesting before you might come to eat it? And you can't eat it because it's Chodosh. So how can you have the minute that the Omer is bought, that everything? That fitting with our Mishnah. No, it's Divrei Amir. It says Divrei Amir.
To be here, you can have it there. It's fine.
It's a contradiction in Amir, if you've got energy to think about it. It's a contradiction. Sorry, Yehuda, we got cut off, but thanks to Moshe and Tolly, we're back on. Again, it's a contradiction in Amir. In our Mishnah, Amir says, check for chametz, and we're not concerned, you may come to eat it. And over here, Amir says, don't you dare harvest the chadosh, because if you do, you may come to eat it. So it's a contradiction in Amir. But God said, Rabbi Yehuda makes no gzeres. So it's a contradiction both in Amir and in Rabbi Yehuda. The Gemara only tackles Rabbi Yehuda at the moment. Omar Rava, Rava says, I'll tell you an answer. Some goes to that, but it's more correct. Shani chodosh b'tir shleitat ve'el alidei kituf uzachu. There's a difference. What is the difference? That regarding the Omer, they were not allowed to harvest it in the normal manner. How did they have to harvest it? Not using a sickle and what the rest of it. They used to pluck it with their hands. So plucking with your hands, that is something which is a shinui. Since we insisted that they had to do a shinui, they had to do a change, so therefore there was no chance they would forget it's chodosh and they'll never come to eat it. B'ashein kain. If we allow people on Pesach to start looking for the chametz, what will they end up doing? Eating it. Okay. There's the Gemara. That makes a lot of sense. The time of the harvesting, that since you told them to harvest it with their hands, they're likely to notice. But the time of the grinding, the time of the sieving, because we look carefully in the Mishnah today, it says they would come out after they've brought the Korban Omer, the streets of Yerushalayim were full of flour. So they've already grinded it, already sieved it. So obviously they've done more. And there, which kind of shinoi is there going to be? And if there's no shinoi, according to Rabbi Yehuda, we don't want people to touch things which are us. Mishnah talks about people feeding their children on Kippur and on Tisha B'Av. Mishnah says, well, it's mutter. And as the Mishnah, why do they tell you it's mutter? Because we're not chayshish that if you start touching it, you might come to nibble at it at the same time. We're not chayshish. Does that fit in, by the way, according to Rabbi Yehuda or Chachamim, by the way? That's Mishnah. Chachamim. According to Rabbi Yehuda, will be a problem because you might come to nibble from it. There's the Gemara regarding the sieving and the grinding. What are you going to say? And says the Gemara, we'll find the shinui there as well. Holy kasha. Tchino, regarding the grinding, you used to use a handheld mill and not a water mill. Harkoda, when they sieved it agabe nofa, they would turn the sieve upside down and sieve it the wrong way around. And therefore, there was always a shinui. there was always something to remind them that it is chodosh, and they would not come to be over the issa chas v'sholom of eating chodosh. Says the Gemara, that's not true. We're still not satisfied. Elohadit now we learned in another Mishnah. The halacha was the omer was brought from the best fields of Eretz Yisrael. You want to bring the omer from where the produce grows best. Now, where does produce not grow well? Mishnah gives us two examples. A field which doesn't have enough rainwater, and the only way to satisfy its water demands is by watering it yourself, it doesn't grow as well because it's a shortage of water, to arid land. Furthermore, in the valleys, things don't grow so well because they don't get a lot of sun. If you think about a big mountain and between you've got like a valley, it doesn't get a lot of sun. Since these fields were not good fields for produce, you never bought the omer there. Since you never bought the omer from there, even though you're not allowed to eat chodosh, because you're not allowed to eat chodosh from anywhere, you're not allowed to eat chodosh even from a valley or even from an arid field. But the fact is, since you knew you're not going to bring the omer from there, Chazal allowed you to harvest it normally from before the omer. So again, you're not allowed to make piles out of it. Kim that the Gemara there says it's Rabbi Yehuda. The more for complicated cheshbon works out that Mishnah has to be shittas Rabbi Yehuda. It's not shittas Rabbi Meir. I don't go into it. It's more Ma'ikelamima. So what are you going to say? So it comes out that Rabbi Yehuda holds you're allowed to harvest a field in the valley, even though you're harvesting it in a normal manner. So we're not chayshish that you're coming to eat it. Why not chayshish coming to eat it? Because it doesn't matter. It's the fact that you're touching something is not a problem. In our Mishnah, he told us don't do b'dikas chametz. Says the Gemara, Eloma Abaya chodosh. Chodosh, a person remembers not to eat because for months and months he's not been eating chodosh. But chametz le'bodel minei, since we're used to eating chametz all the time, so therefore we're more choishish regarding chametz than we are regarding chodosh. That is the answer in Rabbi Yehuda. Kasha. You've got kasha against Rabbanan as well, because in our Mishnah the Chachamim say do b'dikas chametz, and we're not concerned. And yet there they said shaloi b'rotzim chachamim, that we did not allow them to harvest. Says the Gemara, who asked him a chazal of the sofa, he's attempting to burn it. He's doing b'dikas chametz, get rid of it. Mechal koach minei is going to eat from it. The Gemara is going to continue on and on with this. It's always good as much as possible to remember the foundations, and it's easier than afterwards to remember the details. In our Mishnah, Rabbi says, check for chametz, I'm not concerned, you'll eat it. Rabbi says, don't touch the chametz, don't look for chametz, you might come to eat it. When it comes to chodosh, Rabbi says it's no good, don't harvest it. Rabbi says, yes, harvest it. The Gemara asks a steer on both. Rabbi Yehuda, the Gemara answers, chodosh, a person's used to the idea, not allowed to eat it, chametz, not used to it, because the whole year round you're eating it. By Sheinkin, according to Rabbi Meir, he says the logic is different. By chametz, you're attempting to get rid of it. And by Shenkin by Chodesh, you're harvesting it stuff, you might come to eat it. The Rishonim Teizu said he asks this, it's a very important question if you think about it, is that you can't, the Chachamim in our Mishnah, could be the Chachamim really hold, we would prefer that you don't touch chametz. And we prefer you don't touch Chodesh either. In our Mishnah, they permitted you to look for chametz because they had a reason for it, that we don't want you to be over Bali Ro, Bali Motzah. But under normal circumstances, perhaps we don't want you to touch it altogether. And therefore, what's the vibe from our Mishnah? In our Mishnah, the Chachamim will talk about a situation where we are forced to tell you to look for chametz because we're scared you'll come to eat it or baliro or all the other cheshbonis. But it doesn't mean that by chodosh. So Thurs is the one that say interesting svor that the Chachamim also wanted that there should be produce out because it was good for the Oile Vega. People came to Yerushalayim, there would be a shortage of produce. So therefore, there was a need in the produce being already out on display. It wasn't stand that they had produce on display. And if the Chachamim permitted in our Mishnah touching the chametz because you've got a mitzvah to get rid of it, they would have permitted it there if not for the fact that why there. The answer is here, you're trying to get rid of it, there you're not. We're going to continue with other cases as well. First of all, give another answer. We're talking about flour and grain. Now, flour and grain are not edible. Since they're not edible, so therefore, there's no chashash you'll come to eat it. In our Mishnah, what are we talking about? We're talking about proper food. Since it is proper food, so therefore it's a problem. There are many mefarshim all ask exactly the what? What?
Animals. Animals.
You can make food with it. Even more than that, it's a more later that to keep your children up, say the Nag Chalkin, you give out parched grain and nuts, right? If you sure to say that the first thing you do. Many Gedolim used to do that. The first thing they used to do is give out nuts, not parched grain anymore, because all neves beyond belief. But the vice they used to give out parched grain. So they ask what's going on over here. The man asks others. So you can eat it. So some people change the gilsa kemach koli tanan. It's flour of parched grain. Flour of parched grain is inedible. The man himself says that there were different levels of parchedness. If it's very roasted, you can eat it. If it's not so roasted, you can't eat it. Okay. Says the Gemara, "V'hoda Rashi bedusehi." What Rashi says is either bedus meaning a mistake, bodu it's a lie, or berusa means it's something on the outside, meaning something which we do not accept. Why? That what's going to be before it's parched grain. That means when it's a grain, before you started roasting it, you can eat it. And if you're going to say that Rashi agrees to Rava's answer that you would talk about Lidei Shinui, where you're cutting it with your hand, but plucking it with your hand rather than harvesting it, and where there it says properly that you're allowed to harvest it normally, what are you going to say? And Rashi Badusi, that's what Rashi says is a mistake. So Rashi wants to suggest that here we're talking about inedible foods. The Gemara says no, it's not true, because there's different stages where it is edible. And if you're going to answer to me that there, we're going to come up with another answer that we're talking about a shinui, but we saw in another mission they don't need a shinui. So therefore Rashi's Thurs is rejected. So now we've so far only had two places in Shas where we have a problem that you might come to eat something. One is chametz on Pesach when you're looking for it, to destroy it. And one is chodosh when you're harvesting it in order to provide food for the Rebbe. Says Rav Chalechet does Yehuda because that you might come to eat from it? What's not? The halach is like this. If you've got a bowl of oil and a candle lit inside it, and you suddenly you want to add some oil to your salad, you've got, let's say, cucumber salad, you want to have a bit of oil, or you're allowed to take some oil out of the bowl and put it into your salad. Look, you're not allowed to. It's a issa deraisa, the Rishonim say. What's the issa deraisa? Kibui. Kibui. And it's a fascinating machlekes Rishonim, had it with in Shabbos. Is that what's the kibui? What is the kibui exactly? If you take a bit of oil out of the which one? Right. So the Rosh says it's shortening the amount of time it's going to be. Because at the end of the day, what happens is if you take a bit of oil, it was going to be lit for 5 hours, now it's going to be lit for 4 hours. It's kibui. The Rosh asks on himself, Rosh and Beitza asks on himself, if that would be the case, if you see a fire spreading, and you put a brick or a wall in between to stop the fire spreading, or you're doing Gram Kippur, would that also spin out here? Logically, yes, we know that it's not true. You're allowed to. So you're actually allowed to pour water on the table so the fire shouldn't spread further.
That's because you're not taking it away.
But
You're putting something to stop it. You're not.
So he says similar. He says here you're dealing with the item which is creating the light, and you're disturbing it, and therefore stopping it from burning.
You're being proactive.
But the Tosis, more than that. You're taking the lamp itself and diminishing it. Tosis says a different story. Tosis says is because when you take oil out of a lamp, the actual fire immediately becomes smaller.
Because the lamp, no lamp.
Yes, and therefore immediately the fire gets smaller. Says Tosis, according to me, Tosis writes this. According to me, says Tosis, if I've got a long candle and I chop off the bottom, according to Tosis, mutter also. Mutter, why? Because the flame is not going to get smaller, according to the Rosh. Also, because it's going to be less time. And Mamish, they discussed this question. If you take a candle and you cut off the bottom, have you done anything wrong? Tosis says, no, you've not done anything wrong because the candle's not going to get smaller. It's not going to notice. But when you take oil out of a bowl, so the Vice, I tell you why they mentioned this. What? Oh, the Rosh talks about that. Tosis doesn't talk about it. The Rosh in Beitza, talks about it. The Vice, the Rosh says that it's okay if it's got enough oil to last after Shabbos, and then it's going to be, let's say, it's enough for 20 hours, take it down to 10, and it's okay. I want to finish off very because it's getting tied off the point that this makes a very big shiloh with these non-electric Shabbos clocks. Not the electric ones. The electric ones are the problem. Can you do it? the pins, the pin ones.
When it's off or when it's on.
When it's on and you want to get it to go off earlier, have you done anything wrong? Because so I was looking just before the Shiur, just for my own excited thought to my memory. The Rosh Hashanah says like you that you shouldn't. The Rosh Hashanah says a bit more maker. The Rosh Hashanah says it's no good. The Rosh Hashanah says more maker. But the logic of it is based on this Rosh that the Torah says when you're cutting a candle. Okay, now the big question like this: everybody agrees that if you've got a bowl of oil, you're not allowed to take some oil to add to your cucumber salad. But what happens if you've got oil which is a bit apart from the candle? Is that a problem? Because let's say the oil is dripping into the bowl. Is there a chance that is this? Normally, because the candle is there, a person remembers that it's Shabbos and he won't do it. We're not choshesh that person will go during the Friday night meal, go into Shabbos candles or take some oil and drip it into his salad. But if let's say he's got another kid, we say by Mamadikin every Friday night, he's got a shvefel, shabetza, and he puts the oil dripping in, so then you might take from the egg which is dripping in. So this is the shayla. Let's see the Gemara inside. What's now? Lo yikra the shvefel shabetza, a person should make a hole in an egg. V'malena Hashem and fill it with oil. In order that it should drip into the oil. You're not allowed to do that. Why not allowed to do that? Why not allowed to take an egg, empty it, fill it with oil, make a tiny crack, and let it drip into your Shabbos candles? And that way your Shabbos candles last. No, before Shabbos. Let me answer before Shabbos. No, not Shemayata. No, because since the egg is separate, you will be hungry Friday night. And you'll take some oil out of the egg. And you'll think to yourself, I've done nothing wrong because the oil of the egg is not in the lamp. But you have done something wrong because you've diminished. And then the Rosh also asks, yes, this says yes, even then the candle realizes it's got less of a source of oil and it immediately gets smaller. Candles are very wise. Even if it's cheres, which a person doesn't like to eat from, even so it's awesome. Why is Rabbi Yehuda matter? Rabbi Yehuda says, I'm not concerned that people will eat things. People remember that they don't eat things. Now, does this fit with our Mishnah? No. In our Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda says, don't you dare touch chametz if I come to eat it. And here it tells you, you can help yourself. You can make a candle without problem. As for the Shabbos, because of the chumrah of Shabbos, they keep away. And since they keep away, people remember Shabbos more than Pesach. We shouldn't ask you a question. Why are people more scared of Shabbos than of chametz? The Ran asks a question, the Malchalav asks a question. They say a very interesting answer. Rabbi Yehuda was concerned about Erev Pesach between Chatzos and Pesach coming in, where there's only Issa Lav and not Issa Kos. And then you're not so scared because it's not Kos. But in Shabbos, which is Kos, you'll be more scared. I don't say one more thing if you keep Cheshbon, we're getting I don't too much time. Is that the question is, why do you want to ask on the Chachomim? The Chachamim there say you're not allowed to. In our Mishnah, they say you're allowed to look for chametz, and you should be able to tell me the answer. Why do the Chachamim there, they forbid it? Every time we should ask the question, if Rabbi Yehuda contradict himself, so the Chachamim will also contradict themselves. So our Mishnah, they allow you. Why?
Because they don't want anyone to
they don't. I mean, because in our Mishnah, they allowed you to look for chametz because they wanted to get rid of Bali Vo, Bali Motzah, and he might not come to the Pesach. But there, with the egg of the oil, they didn't see any advantage in it. So then they said, we prefer you don't do it. So therefore, we forbid it. But actually, in our Mishnah, they didn't want to. That means like this. The Chachamim agree with Rabbi Yehuda that we would prefer that people don't touch things which is asa because you might come to eat it. In our Mishnah, we have no choice. What do you do to get chametz because you might come to eat on Pesach? But in there, we've got a choice. Just don't put the egg there. Just satisfy yourself with a bowl of oil and use that oil. Okay. Says, well, the Shabbos at the Shabbos. I'm going to ask another contradiction. The Tanya, you go to the well to draw some water and you find that the rope has snapped. You should make a knot, you can make a bow. You can make a bow to attach the rope back together. You can use a hollow belt. Or piski or garter. People don't wear garters nowadays. In the olden days, your socks would roll down. So what you did was you take like a string. If you ever read like George William, I think they would play with the garters as catapults. But what happened was you just have it around your socks to make sure that your socks didn't slip down. It was like to keep things up. A garter. I think Hasidim sometimes have it, no? Anyway, yes. So you're allowed to use these things to tie your Shabbos belt. But you're not allowed to make a bow. So Gemara asks a kasha. Kasha Rabbi Yehuda makes a gzeira. Sorry, Rabbi Yehuda makes a gzeira. and the Chachamim don't. Mashain came by earlier by the oil. Rabbi Yehuda permitted it, and here Rabbi Yehuda forbids it. Kash Rabbanon Rabbanon. There the Chachamim by the oil forbade it, and here by the belt they permit it. It says, "Well, Rabbanon Rabbanon Kash Shem Mishem Michlef." If we allow you to take one oil from the egg, you might take oil from the main bowl, and it's no good. But Haniva B'Kshiur Michlef, we're not concerned that you'll mix up a bow with a knot. So therefore, they forbade the egg, the oil of the egg. But they didn't forbid the oil. They didn't forbid a bow. A bow is more distinguishable from a knot than the oil of the egg of the oil of the bow. Says Rabbi Yehuda Leikash, Tamid Rabbi Yehuda, La Mishum de Goz Haniva to Kshiur, and Mishum de Kosav Haniva Gufa Kshiur here. The Gemara haven't understood that the reason that Rabbi Yehuda forbids you to do a bow is because if you come to do a bow, you might come to do a knot. And the Gemara says that's a gzeira. And the Gemara asks the Kasha, if Rabbi Yehuda is geyser by bows, why was he not geyser with this oil, which is in a separate container dripping into the oil? Says the Gemara, there's no comparison. The reason he forbids by a bow has nothing to do with a gzeira, because he holds that a bow itself is a knot. We had this a few times. Yes, that's right. Rabbi Yehuda holds that actually making a bow is awesome in Hatorah. Just like making a knot is also making a bow is also. Therefore, it's not a gzeira. It's because it itself is awesome. Says, well, let's ask another question. You're allowed to tie a bucket with a garter. Not with a rope. Rabbi Yehuda permits it. And he explains. Which kind of rope are we discussing? And the Chachamim forbid, and Rabbi Yehuda permits it. Normal rope. Rabbi Yehuda Mati, Kesher Shokayamu. We learned regarding a knot that one of the fundamental things for it to be asa is it has to be a long time knot, right? If you make a knot which you're only planning to leave for a couple of hours, that's not considered a kesher in the Torah. And it's not awesome in Hatorah, it is awesome in Rabbanon. Therefore, to draw water, they could have permitted it, right? They permitted it to be able to get the water. So over here, what we talk about, if we talk about a normal rope, why would the Chachamim permit it? A normal rope, you tie it on Shabbos afternoon, you may leave it there forever because you're not going to bother after Shabbos untying it and providing a new rope. It's a good rope, you'll leave it there. And Pshita the Gadi, we're talking about a weaver's rope. Rashi here says a weaver's rope is no good because it's too weak, it'll snap. Rashi in Shabbos says a weaver's rope is no good because it's expensive and he's not going to leave it there. Imagine use that to your tie to tie up your bucket. After Shabbos, you're going to want your tie back and you're going to use a cheaper rope. So whatever the reason may be, it's a rope which a person has no intention to leave there long term. They did make a gzeira. Why did they say before by a bow that it's okay? But why? Because they said that you don't make a gzeira from a bow to a knot. Why? Because people will remember bows permitted, a knot is forbidden. But over here, they are forbidding you from using a weaver's rope at what? In case you might come to use a normal rope. So why suddenly there the goes and there the not goes? And what's the logic? Says well, yes. Ropes will get mixed up. There's a fundamental difference between a bow and a knot, which you don't have between a weaver's rope and a normal rope. What? One's material. That's right. So you can see that there's a difference, and therefore there the word goes there, here the word goes there. It says, well, does Rabbi Yehuda not make a gzeira when people are nervous to leave it? Well, Tanya, Bechor is an animal which is the firstborn. You give it to the Kohen, and the Kohen eats it. Now, in the time when there's no Beis Hamikdash, what's the Kohen have to do? Hope that there's a mum. If there's no mum, he's really, really, really stuck. We discussed this many times. There's a story, a famous story of Shuvah from Moshe, that what happened was a person in America had their firstborn, and usually they sell a portion to the Kohen in order they shouldn't belong. But here he forgot to. And he had a huge hassle. He had to leave it to the field by itself. And every year they would go. And what happened was the vets in America have a rule that every animal has to be injected once a year for different viruses and whatnot. And they always used to daven that they would inject it into the ear. They would break a bone in the ear. And you'd have to the Chachamim looking at it. You're not allowed to hold it down in case you make a mum in it. So you'd have to watch it over a fence. And eventually one year, finally, the fellow who put the injection broke a bone in the ear and had a mum. And then you could shecht it. So you always wanted it to have a mum. If it's got no mum, you can't shecht out Beis Hamikdash. So we don't want the Kohanim to do something to make a mum. Now what happens if the Bechor needs treatment? So the question is, which treatment do we allow it to do without being nervous that it's going to actually the same to make him mum? But Tanya, Bechor Shach Zeidam, it's got too much blood. That was a common illness nowadays, bloodletting. Even if we're going to see it die, if we don't do it, Yehuda says you're not allowed to do bloodletting. Why? Why not allowed to do bloodletting? Because if we allow you to do bloodletting, even though it's not a mum, but you may, because you want a mum, at the same time slip in a mum. So we don't allow you to do any bloodletting. The Chachamim say yes, you're allowed to, but as long as you don't put in a mum. So we see that Yehuda holds they're not allowed to. So we see that it's not Bechayim, it's only when there's no purpose. Here, there's a purpose. It's a Bechayim. We're scared that you're going to put a mum inside it. We're scared that you're going to be over this matter bum Bechayim. Answers well, topic that from base. A person wants to save his money. So the Gemara says, we say that if we start allowing it to do bloodletting and he's scared that the Bechor is going to die, he'll end up doing other bloodletting and then making the Bechor have a mum. That means there was two ways to do bloodletting. And sometimes he needed it in the area which wasn't a mum, and really that which should be permitted. But the problem is, another time, if we permit him, then he'll say that my Bechor is dying unless I do bloodletting in the place where there is a mum. So therefore we don't allow any bloodletting at all. The Chum say they take their logic the other way around. They say that if you don't allow him to do bloodletting, because of the fact that it might make him mum, so he'll think to himself, wow, I'm really going to lose this Bechor. The Bechor is going to die. So he'll go especially make him mum in order that he should no longer have Kedushas Bechor and then that way be able to eat it. So again, the was asking, as I said, it's hard to keep track each time the cheshbon of when. It's in our Mishnah we have guarding chometz of Yudas machmir that you were scared if you look for the chometz you might come to eat it. The chometz saying no, we don't care, you can touch chometz. Guarding bechor, the logic is different. That there the chometz say if we don't allow you to do bloodletting, you might come to do a mum lechatchila. Rabbi says if we allow you to do bloodletting, you'll do a bloodletting in the case where it's in the proper mum. Many times animals need to be combed. You need to comb an animal. There's two ways to comb an animal. One with a wooden comb, one with a metal comb. The metal combs had the teeth very close. The wooden combs had very separate combs. The big nafkamina is that the metal combs would invariably cause bleeding, and the wooden combs will not. So the question is, are you allowed to comb your animal on Shabbos? You're not allowed to use a metal one. You're allowed to use a wooden one. You're not allowed to use either one on Yom Tov. You can't comb down your animal on Yom Tov. Kidu, ketanim, it's very close to each other. They make wounds and bleeding. Counts of kedulim, they're separate. So we see over here, Rabbi Yehuda says you're not allowed to. Sorry, Rabbi Yehuda permits you to use the one which doesn't cause bleeding, and the Chum forbid you both. So therefore, why do we say that Rabbi Yehuda permits you to do bloodletting, and over here, so why does Rabbi Yehuda say that there you mustn't do bloodletting at all, and yet over here he allows you to do combing? Why regarding bloodletting is he machmir, and regarding combing is he meikol? So the Gemara says, "Hossa, by the bechor, where if you let it, the bloodletting could cause death. Then we say that people get very nervous and start being over yisur. It doesn't cause the animal not being combed down does not cause death. All it causes is a bit of pain. So therefore, so exactly, if he gets so nervous, he might come to be over yisur. So we say, don't touch your animal altogether. Regarding combing, where the worst case scenario, the animal won't die, the animal will be uncomfortable, so then we're more meikol. It comes out the less urgent the animal is, we're more meikol because you're less likely to get nervous. We had that in Shabbos, that by a fire we're sometimes more machmir because once you allow you to do something, you'll get nervous and do everything. So for the same thing regarding the, says the Gemara, so, Rabbi Yehuda, why by chometz did not let you touch it? Or But Hashem came by combing, he did not forbid it. By combing, he allows you to comb with a wooden comb. But by chometz, he doesn't let you touch it. He says, well, lechem michlaf. One bread with another bread, you get mixed up, you might come to eat it. You will not get mixed up between wooden combing and metal combing. Now, the Kivega, given us Shas, says that I was very, very bothered that in our Mishnah, if you touch the chometz, dikas chometz, because we're talking about checking on Pesach, El Pesach, and you come to eat it, what Issa would have been over? Issa Derais, eating chametz. Here, even if you comb it with a metal comb, it's not an Issa Derais. At best, it's only an Issa Derabbanan. Why? Because you do not intend to cause a wound. Your intention. So what Pesach is only Derabbanan? It's Pesach only. And he says, in fact, the Gemara tells us elsewhere in Shabbos and in Beitza that it's not in the Pesach. It's only likely to cause bleeding, but it's not in the Pesach. It's not definite. Kivega says it's a tzorich gadol. I do not have an answer. And he finishes off that the Tosfos Rishonim eventually found the Tosfos Rishonim asks a kasha. I looked at the Tosfos Rishonim says the Gemara could have answered that. The Gemara had a better answer. The Gemara just relied on his answer that you get mixed up with bread, you don't get mixed up between metal combs or wooden combs. And just very briefly, the Rogatchover Gaon was once very ill, and they wanted to cheer him up. So what happened was people would come to talk to him in learning to distract him. But it didn't work because anybody that came in, he was very fast and he didn't have patience. So somebody came up with the idea, when looking at Shiva, that what they would do is look through Kivega. Any question Kivega asks, and he leaves as a difficult one, leaves as a question, then they would go and ask him in that way, because he never used to learn Achronim, when he learned to show. So they did it. And there was certain brachas that would only take tzorich gadol questions, and some would take tzorich questions. And the Rogatchover told the Rosh Yeshiva afterwards that those, he didn't know that they were asking Kivega questions, those brachas did actually know how to learn a bit. That's what he said. But this is a very difficult question. What's more compared to Chametz Ma'aser? I was thinking maybe to summarize the whole Gemara, but we're running out of time. He worked out, the truth about it is, it's hard to summarize. Rashi himself, at the bottom of Yudalef and Mudalef, goes to pure Cheshbonis, because each time it's a slightly different question. We've had a few different topics when we were going. So we had Chametz on Pesach, we had Chodosh, we had the oil of Shabbos, we had making a bow and a knot, whether we're going so different kinds of ropes. That means if you're using a weaver's rope, and then we had finally bloodletting, a bechor, and combing an animal and yomtov. New topic in your Mishnah. Now we know that min haTorah, when you're not allowed to eat chametz from, then the 6th hour, which we'll call it 12:01, from 12 o'clock for chatzos. When we talk about hours here, by the way, we're talking about shows manius, but we'll stick to that as if. We'll see later why it's as if it's a 6 to 6, and therefore 12 o'clock it's awesome. So you're allowed to eat the whole 5th hour. The 5th hour would be 10 till 11. From 10 till 11. Worked out 6 to 7, 7 till 8, 8 till 9, 9 till 10, 10 till 11 you can eat. You have to put it to the beginning of the 6th. When min haTorah do you have to be finished by? The end of the 6th, because you're not allowed to eat. But he says we have to put it in the beginning of the 6th. We are allowed to eat it only in the 4th hour, that is 9 till 10. And between 10 to 11, you're not allowed to eat it, but you're allowed to benefit from it. And you burn it beginning of Sheish. So what the Gzera was, the Ma'am Chalav asks the question that min haTorah there's no difference. After Chatzos, chametz is also ba'achila and it's also b'hano. So since it's also b'achila and b'hano, why did Rabbi Yehuda come up with this strange division that eating, he says, I'm going to forbid you 2 hours. Pleasure, I'm only going to forbid you 1 hour. So he gives 2 answers. One is when a person gets involved in eating, it takes him a long time to stop eating. So if we're allowing to eat in the 5th hour, he might continue even later. Second of all, he says like this: Be'emes Chazal were concerned about mamonim shalisah. We don't try to lose the money. So therefore, they didn't want people really to eat even from the 5th hour or to get pleasure. But they realized that it would cause a huge financial loss. So to save the financial loss, they said you're allowed to benefit from it, we're not allowed to eat. Okay. They found 2 chalas of a Torah, which was possible. What describes exactly what kind of Torah it was. They put it on a bench which was around the Beis Hamikdash. While there was 2 chalas there, everybody knew that you're allowed to eat. Those days never had watches, so you needed to have something to let you know when you're allowed to eat. So they used to put 2 chalas. Once 1 chala was taken, you're not allowed to eat, we don't need to burn, you're just allowed to get pleasure. This soifin, everybody would start burning it because they knew it was beginning of the 6th hour. So Rabbi Yehuda says 2 things. One is he argues with Rabbi Meir regarding which hour of the day is forbidden. And another thing he does, he tells us that there was a special simon. The Gemara later says there was actually other simonim to remind people, like nowadays, the basic puts out a calendar with what times. So based on would do that, they would put chalas out to remind people what is forbidden. There's a special mitzvah not to waste truma. You have to look after truma, to guard it. You mustn't waste it. You mustn't destroy it. So regarding chulin, they were said only eat for 4, but not more. But truma kol chomesh, but truma they gave you an extra hour to eat because we don't want it to get destroyed unnecessarily. But at the 6th hour you burn it even by truma. If you didn't get a chance to eat it by truma, at the end of the day it's chometz. You've got no choice. So it's agreeing with Rabbi Yehuda. By the way, Rabbi Yehuda is agreeing with Rabbi Yehuda that really normal food you have to stop eating 2 hours before the final time. Rameir says you've got an hour. Rabbi Yehuda is machmir 2 hours before chatzos. You have to stop eating. He just argues with Rabbi Yehuda one tiny point regarding truma. But otherwise, he agrees with Rabbi Yehuda. The next daf goes off completely sachim and goes into the topic of eidos. The halacha is when eidim would come in, then by dinner and foshes ima did moment a little bit, they would ask them 7 questions, very strange questions. Which shmita in the Yovel is it? I don't know how many people here would even. I don't know which shmita of the Yovel it means. In the Yovel is 7 times 7. There's no Yovel nowadays. There wouldn't be. But which shmita is it? That means which 7-year cycle is it? Which year in the shmita? Which month? Which week? Which day? And which day of the week and which day of the month? So, for example, they would say Wednesday. But Wednesday, was it the 3rd of the month or the 2nd of the month? Which, so as I said, and which hour? That's the 7th. Now, if the Eidim would say, I don't know regarding any of these 7 questions, that would be the end of the Eidim. So you can't say you don't know. That would put Chakiras. Afterwards, at Bedikas, right? Bedikas was what color shoes was he wearing? How did he kill him? With a knife, with a spear? With Bedikas, you're allowed to say you don't know. You're allowed to say you don't know. Right? We'll go quite a lot of Chakiras and Bedikas. It's good to have a bit of a background. Now, Chakiras, let's see the Gemara inside of it. It's not awesome. Echad Omer 1:8 says, B'shnayim b'chodesh. That happened on the 2nd day of the month, based on the 2nd day of Kislev. Echad Omer b'shloisha, edusen kayemes. That's not a contradiction. Why is that not a contradiction? One of them knew that the last month was 30 days, and the other one thought it was 29 days. So they're actually both talking about the same day. One of them said it's the 2nd of the month, and one said it was the 3rd of the month. And that is why they made that mistake. But really, so Tosa asks the question, big quotations, top of the data from base. Now, what kind of thing is this? You're killing somebody on the basis of an edus, which is highly likely to be contradictory. We could explain that one of them is an Amoret and didn't know that Rosh Chodesh was an extra day, that they pushed Rosh Chodesh off. But you could explain that they're liars, contradicting each other. So why in the world do we accept such an edus? Says Tosis. Because one of the questions we asked them was not just what day of the month, we also asked them what day of the week. And they answered the same day. So since they've answered the same day, we are forced to conclude that they must have made a mistake regarding it. He says, but what happens if it was late in the month? What happens if it was the 15th or the 16th? Then it's too late. Because by then, everybody's dawned upon them that which day of the month. Because by then, they used to use the Yiddish calendar a lot more. Rashi writes, they think that when Mashiach comes, this Gemara will not be the halacha l'maisa. So because nowadays, we're all very makbid on the halal, and Yualev Yavo. In those days, they weren't so much that they didn't necessarily say halal. So therefore, we all know when Rosh Chodesh is. To say that a person doesn't know when Rosh Chodesh is, he says it's unexpected thing. In those days, not necessarily people know when Rosh Chodesh is. Again, it's important thesis. Maybe like another time, there's got a lot of lumdus in this thesis. That thesis asks the question: how can you kill somebody on the basis of something which you can find out? They said because it's the same day, we're forced to conclude they made a mistake on the thing. Okay. One says it was the 3rd day of the month, and one says it was the 5th day of the month. Edus and Betela, obviously that Edus is a waste of time because they're 2 days apart. One said it was the 2 hours of the day. 2 hours is the 2nd hour of the day. Everybody agrees that that's okay. Why is that okay? Because they could have got mixed up. They didn't have watches. He said the 2nd hour of the day, he says the 3rd hour of the day. Got mixed up. Oh, we'll see. Very good. If one says the 3rd hour of the day, 3rd hour of the day is like 9 o'clock in the morning. If you say the day starts at 6, and another one says 11 o'clock in the morning, it doesn't. Amir says that's too far off. He says 9 o'clock. He says 11 o'clock must be lying. If one says it was 11 o'clock and one says it was 1 o'clock, it does some betela. Why? It's the same mixed mistake. He said 9 o'clock, 11 o'clock, said Rabbi Yehuda, that's not a contradiction. Because, very good, we'll see, not in Manchester because you can't see the sun. But in most places, the difference between 9 o'clock and 11 o'clock is not so pronounced. And therefore, says Rabbi Yehuda, even though you, Amir, think it's a contradiction, I personally don't think it's a contradiction. I think that what happened was they just got mixed up. But if one of them says 11 o'clock and one says 1 o'clock, that's a contradiction. Why? He explains. Why? Let's see, he explains. This bothered me. I eventually actually called it. If you don't, what is Sheva? Sheva means a minute after 12 o'clock. That's how we'll see later. A minute after 12 o'clock, where's the sun? Well, yeah, we'll see. Where is it? It's in the middle, so I will say Chama b'Marav. 12:01. Tiny bit. It's towards the west. Yeah, that's what you're forced to say. It's towards the west. Yeah, but Sheva we will see. It doesn't mean Sheva means there's a 7th hour from 12 till 1. 12 to 1, the sun's in the west, not by me. Okay. All right, so that's right. But Mav, it's noted to Mav. Now, okay. So now we've got, let's go to Machlekes of Men Rabbi Yehuda. What's the Machlekes of Men Rabbi Yehuda? If two Eidim come along and one says it happened at 9 o'clock and one said at 11 o'clock, according to Rabbi Yehuda, they're contradicting each other and we throw them out of base. Sorry, according to Rabbi Meir, they're contradicting each other, we throw them out of base. According to Rabbi Yehuda, they're not contradicting each other. Why are they not contradicting each other? Because it's possible to make mistakes. Not everybody knows the exact time. So between 9 and 11, that's the Machlekes. Everybody agrees 9 and 10, that was a mistake. Everybody agrees 11 and 1, that's definitely a contradiction. Between 9 and 11, between the 3rd and the 5th, that's the Machlekes. Now, Abaya is going to explain two versions. We have two versions in Abaya in explaining, and later we'll only do tomorrow, Rava disagrees with both. The Abaya has two versions of understanding. Why is it that 9 and 11 is not a contradiction according to Rabbi Yehuda, but it is a contradiction according to Amir? The answer lies in the fact that Amir and Rabbi Yehuda are arguing how mistaken are people? How much of a mistake do people make? There's another point we have to remember, is when you say 9, do you mean the beginning of the 9th? And you say the end of the 11th, which in that case, we're actually 3 hours apart. If I say 9 and I meant the end of the 9th and you meant the beginning of the 11th, we're only 1 hour apart. So let's see, it's a lot to keep in track, but let's try. On my back, if you think about it. People don't make mistakes at all. And therefore, if they make a 2-hour mistake, there's a contradiction. Because they must be lying. Nobody makes mistakes at all. Oh, why? If he says 9 and 10, is it okay? Because when the 9 and 10 is okay, because he meant the end of the 9th, he meant the beginning of the 10th, so not making a mistake. But nobody ever makes mistakes. Yeah, we kill people on the basis that people don't make mistakes.
No, that we know that he meant the end.
Oh, the Gemara asks that later. The Tivri Rabbi Yehuda, people make a mistake of a half an hour, let's say. When did the story actually happen? At the end of the 2nd and beginning of the 3rd. One who said the 2nd hour, he meant the end of the 2nd hour. One who said the 3rd, he meant the beginning of the 3rd. So therefore, they weren't arguing. He said 9, he said 10. He said 9, he said 11. So if he said 9, he said 10, we believe them because he meant the end of the 9th, beginning of the 10th. But if he said 9, he said 11. Since there's somewhere it's gone wrong, we don't believe them. People do make a mistake half an hour. It happens 3:30, meaning 3:30, at the end of after 3.5 hours. So one person said it happened after 3, one said 3 and one said 5, and it happened after half an hour in the middle hour. That means you've got the 3rd day, you've got the 5th hour. It happened in the middle of the 4th hour. So, sorry, I've lost the place. One who said the 3rd, Besof Sholish meant the end of the 3rd. According to our example of 6 till 9 and 11, he meant to say 9:59, which means basically 10 o'clock. The Katoy Bagad Shata made a mistake half an hour because really it should have been was really 10:30. The Kameh. Means the beginning of the 5th, which is 11 o'clock exactly. The Katoy Bagad Shata was really half an hour earlier. That's one version that Abaya uses to explain Machlekes. The Thurs says, I was very happy to see this Thurs. that Abaya rejected this version because it comes out, if you think about it very carefully, according to Rabbi Yehuda, that the only way to say it's not contradiction, when one says 3 and one says 5, if we assume that they both made a mistake. They each made the mistake of half an hour. But says this, Rosh Abaya was reluctant to take this explanation, and now he changes it to a new explanation. It is better to say that one person made a big mistake than to say 2 people made half. If I come to you and I say to you, I saw a police car driving down King's Road at 10 o'clock. Somebody else says 11 o'clock. What would you say is more likely? One of us made an hour mistake, or that both of us made half an hour mistake? According to the first version of Abaya, they both made a mistake to the maximum of half an hour. But that's reluctant because you're coming on to the fact, you're relying on the fact that they both made mistakes.
That's because we have watches nowadays.
No, but it says Abaya, the second version is much better in the sense that it's more likely that only one of them made a mistake. One of them made a proper mistake. It's better to assume that one person made a real mistake than to make an assumption that both of them, you're forced to say that both made a mistake, only a small mistake.
Double assumption as well. When in the
Yes.
hour it is as well.
Oh, very good. That's another very good question. There's a double assumption. Not only assuming they made a mistake, we also make an assumption when they said within an hour. And that Rav is going to challenge Abaya, and if he does, rejects. Let's get to the second version of Abaya. Person makes a small mistake, meaning that when he said second, he meant the end of the second. He said the end of the beginning of the third. It's a small mistake. It happened either the beginning of the third or the end of the second. Or one of them made a real mistake of a tiny amount. That means one of them made a real mistake. It was either the beginning of the third or the end of the second, and one of them got it a bit wrong. A person makes a mistake of an hour and a bit. The story happened either the end of the third or the beginning of the fifth. Again, one said it's the third, one said it's the fifth. And we're saying like this, that the story actually happened either the end of the third. In our example, one of them says 9 o'clock, one says 11 o'clock. It happened either a minute before 10. Or it happened 11:01. One of them made a mistake of an hour a bit. The one who said that if it happened at 11, if it happened at 11:01, so the one who said 9, he meant 9:59, and he's out by an hour and 2 minutes. And if it happened at 9:59, the one who said 11 o'clock is out by an hour and a minute. So therefore, somebody made a mistake of an hour. Rather than say each one made a mistake of half an hour, okay, so we'll stop over here. So we're up to the top line on Daf Yud Beis Amud Aleph, and we're going to continue with this quite complicated cheshbon of 8 in the making mistakes. Okay. Right.